Hello, friend.
Hi.
Thanks for coming to the house.
Oh, I'm so happy to finally see it.
This is the place. I need to come to yours now. You and Neil's your cabin in the woods,
You're invited.
which you describe so beautifully in the book. And
The House of Life and Death.
yeah, but for a lot of times it's just referred to as death.
The Death House. It needs to evolve.
The house or your language around it.
Well, my relationship with that house evolved. Neil and I, we got it like 6 years ago. Mm-hmm. And it has, one of the weird things also about being married to Neil is that...
Neil Gaiman,
yeah. My husband, is that we have different boundaries about privacy and our public narratives of what our lives are and where we're living and what we're doing. And we've really had to learn how to waltz around that. And that house was part of the waltz.
Amanda Palmer's here. She's got a brand new record and a brand new book. They work beautifully together. They're complementary, but there's so much context and detail about things like how you manage your songs and your life and your art. And I know there's very rarely been a separation for you between the two, but of your personal life and what you make. As you went through this process, did any of that change?
I think I got braver.
How do you define brave?
More likely to do a frightening artistic thing without stressing the anxiety of the consequences.
How people will react.
Yeah. And a lot of that was because of my Patreon. I just knew that no matter what happened, I was set. And that gave me a kind of a creative control, artistic free pass to just go way further than I might have gone if I'd known that I was going to have to gather up this record and take it to Steve in marketing at Roadrunner Records, because this just would have not gone over. No. But I also I didn't realize how much Kool-Aid I had been drinking in terms of the collision between art and commerce until I really went off grid.
Right.
And that metaphor actually works pretty well. Until you stop using something or stop doing something, you don't realize how much it's pervaded your everyday, ordinary existence.
And for people who may not be fully up to speed on what you're doing, Patreon is this really cool website where you can, and it's a community where you can go to your consumer directly, your fans directly, but it's a non-traditional release mechanism. It can be whatever you want, however they want to contribute. And you've done this amazing job. You make a ton of money off it, but you also have an incredible output. I get of all the people I follow on Patreon, you're the most active in terms of how you communicate with people. How did you even learn how to reach people? How to work that program?
Well, that's why I wanted to become a musician.
To
hang out with people. I don't know why other people become musicians and artists, but I remember being 7 years old and looking at the variety of jobs available.
What were the options? What were your short list?
Oh, like most 7-year-olds, veterinarian, astronaut, and I was a very hungry social child. I loved the things that fascinated me, the things that glittered in the distance were social things, were cool people at parties, artists staying up until all hours wearing berets and smoking cigarettes. Those were the things that made me wide-eyed as a child, those ideas. And I figured that, becoming an artist and a musician was the only job that actually allowed you to do that as full time.
Right.
Be in communion. I was a really sort of lonely child, and I always sort of found myself floundering around looking for my tribe, wondering where they were. And I just always worked on the expectation that music was going to be the key to finding that, figuring it out. And I was right.
And the music path can be so many things. How long did it take you to find out what your experience was going to be in this?
What do you mean?
To reach an audience when we were growing up, there was a system in place.
Yeah.
That system isn't required now, but to be really rich, you still need the system if that's what you want. Even modern hip-hop artists who think they're all indie, it's just SoundCloud has replaced what a label would have been.
Sure, yeah.
So how did you figure out your way through it? Because you could have done the easier trip, and you did not take the easy trip.
No, but I also didn't want to be rich.
Right.
Which which is important to understand.
But you wanted to reach an audience.
I wanted to be connected.
Right.
I wanted to be I wanted to be around a lot of people. And I think even deeper than that, and this is something that I'm just starting to really clock as I get older, I just wanted to be understood. And the more people that understood me, the happier I was going to be.
Why? Why do you think that? Why did that matter?
I think because I felt deeply misunderstood and unseen as a kid. Mm-hmm. And artists and musicians, and their particular way of like forging a path to being understood, not understood in terms of just like intellectually, understood in terms of seen, accepted as their freaky selves. And that's why we were just talking about David Bowie. That's why this lineage of performers who were so totally unapologetically themselves and just seem to have like no time and make no allowances for whatever the societal demand is on what an artist be or what a person be or what a man be or what a woman, whatever. Those were my idols. I just looked at those people and I was like, I want to do that. Not because I want their money,
right.
Not because I want their fame, but because I want to feel that understood. And by the way, I saw the flip side even from 7 years old. If you're that understood, a lot of people are also going to misunderstand you. That's just sort of goes with the territory.
You just have to choose which one you care more about.
Right.
Right? It's also, I think, to those artists that you're talking about, Bowie and the like, the more unapologetic they were, the more space they created for themselves. What they actually did was create this enormous wake behind them where other misunderstood people felt safe. I remember seeing Marilyn Manson play at a hockey arena in Buffalo, and 14-year-old boys were walking around wearing skirts and eyeliners. And I remember looking at it thinking, first of all, that's amazing. And second of all, it's a fucking metal show.
Yes.
That didn't happen at metal shows. And Manson created a space. And I think when an artist can be more than that for them, their expression, that's when it has real community value. Was that important to you?
It's the most important to me. And that's what the Dresden Dolls did. I mean, the Dresden Dolls we were like a really reviled band in Boston because we were so unhip. And so we flew in the face of what all the indie rock rules of 1999 were.
I used to hate when they would write your band up and call it cabaret. I thought cabaret, as a respected art form, I thought, fuck, that is so dismissive to just call it cabaret, because it felt way more punk to me than cabaret.
Yeah. Well, there wasn't really a good word for us. Yeah. And but the thing that really, one of the details that really stands out from those early Dresden Dolls shows is that Brian and I wanted desperately to create a space of total inclusivity, to the point where our show flyers and our mailers stressed that. Like, everyone fucking belongs here. Everybody. Bring anybody. Tell anybody. We are not a cool band. We don't fucking care.
How old were you around when you were doing this?
25.
It's interesting how, babies.
Yeah, we were teeny. Brian was 23.
And people's reactions, both positive and negative, are as if you're supposed to be the wisest 75-year-old of all time. It's like, what? They're 25 and 23. This is incredible effort. And effort, I think, is what needs to be rewarded half the time.
Yeah, we were a very, very hardworking band, especially Brian. Brian, when the final chapter is written on the Dresden Dolls, whenever that is, I hope Brian really gets his due, because Brian, totally changed the course of my life, obviously. If I hadn't met him, no Dresden Dolls, and who knows what would have happened and where I would have spun. Right. But his passionate work ethic. Have you ever seen the Dresden Dolls play?
No, never.
Watching Brian Viglione do the work of being a live musician is like a religious experience. He's so deeply connected to whatever that thing is. And he actually created a space for me. Not a lot of people know this, but when Brian and I started the Dolls, even though I was a couple years older, I was the neophyte. Brian had been playing in punk bands for 8 years and touring in clubs and basements for 8 years when he met me. I was this kind of timid, insecure songwriter who had played a couple of open mics and was scared shitless. And Brian fucking get in the van'd me.
That's amazing.
He would just give me, he would give me hardcore pep talks. I would be crying in sound checks at clubs where I was feeling totally isolated and misunderstood. And Brian would just give me these hardcore Henry Rollins pep talks about how I had to give no shits and fucking believe in myself and get over there and play your fucking piano and I will play the drums and fuck all these people. And I was like, God, this is happening. He believed in my songs. Mm-hmm. That's sort of another thing that kind of, I think could get easily ignored about that early chapter of my life with Brian, which is, I didn't really know who I was yet. I knew that, I knew that I had songs. I knew that I thought that I was a good songwriter. And Brian would just be sitting there at the drums and I would play him a new song, like the kind of stuff that you hear on the first Dolls records. And he would look at me and be like, that's amazing songwriting. Do you know how amazing you are? No one else is doing what you're doing, Amanda. No one else is saying what you're saying.
This is the importance of language and communicating to somebody, not just that you like them, but why. That's massive, isn't it?
Yeah. He authenticated me.
It's incredible.
And, you also have to remember what these songs were about. These were like my early, super confused, psychotic feminist rants about abuse and rape. And there was Brian, punk 23-year-old Black Flag fan, mm-hmm. looking at me saying, this is fucking punk rock. You are awesome. We're doing this. He made me believe whatever small voice was sort of inside me quietly whispering, maybe this is good. He just embiggened it and made it real.
And then with that wind or that belief in you, you branched out and started to push every aspect of your creative life. Was it always in your head, we can do books and performances all this stuff? You had this plan.
Yeah, because that's why rock and roll was so tempting compared to going into the other things that I was sort of lightly considering when I was in my early 20s. And I was like, do I want to do theater? Do I want to write and direct? I was a theater kid. That was my main passion. I clocked more hours writing and directing plays and being in them as a high school kid than I did being in bands. I wasn't in a band. I was this shy songwriter off to the side who was too afraid to play anyone my music. But I was a really loud theater kid and I loved writing plays and I created lots of, performance art pieces and theatrical moments and street performance. And, again, looking at the options, I was like, well, if you start a band, you can kind of do everything. Whereas if you go down the theater track, it's, you probably have to compromise a lot more. There's a lot of bureaucracy, but anyone can fucking start a band.
Also, I was in theater. I don't find it a particularly inclusive or welcoming club. I find that it's as narrow as a golf club in terms of its rules and expectations and cool factor.
Yeah.
And in rock and roll.
Even in the avant-garde, particularly in the avant-garde.
Exactly, yeah. And whereas you get into the rock and roll world, it's sort of whatever you want.
Right.
And it's where, do you remember what you first wrote on piano, the piano parts? Do you remember sitting at a piano feeling like you had a melody?
Oh, yeah.
What's your first melody?
Oh my God. I had a lot of early songs. I don't remember what was first. It's funny. I was just thinking about this the other day because I was thinking about, I'm in this terrible point right now with the stage show where I'm like, oh, I could add this and I could add this and I could add this. Oh, fuck. And now the show is going to be 6 hours long. Cut. The same way I went through this when I wrote a book.
Yeah.
You just start getting excited about everything you can say. And then you realize you can't say everything all at once.
Right. You've managed to say a lot in this book.
Well, yeah. And this isn't even really a book. I mean, I spent 2 weeks writing this particular book that you're talking about. I was talking more about The Art of Asking, which was like a year-long editing slog of
cutting
stuff out. And but I was thinking there's actually a really funny story that I if it doesn't wind up in the stage show, which it won't, I can tell it to you.
Tell it to
about
us.
one of my first songs, which was my only audience at that point when I was like 10 was my mom. And I had a really complicated relationship with my mom because she was really supportive, but she wasn't really artistic. She didn't really understand music very much and whatever. My mom is very literal. And I wrote this song called, I did what a lot of like young songwriters I'm sure do, which is like, you could probably call it like aspirational songwriting. Like I didn't know dick about anything.
Right.
I'd never been in a relationship. I'd never done drugs. Like I hadn't done anything. I was 10.
You were 10.
But like I listened to a lot of music and I knew what the cool songwriting topics were. So I was like, I'm going to write a song about drugs. And I was 10.
You played it for your mom?
And I played it for my mom, and it was called, I don't even remember what key it was in. It doesn't matter. It was called The Train to Nowhere. And it was like, oh, God, I'm going to have to find a key that I can even sing in. The train to nowhere is leaving soon. It had a Yaz influence.
Right.
This is when I was listening to a lot of Alison Moyet and Yaz. Passengers, get your tickets. Everyone make room. And then it was a long list of metaphors about how doing drugs is like getting on a train to nowhere.
That's right. At 10, your mom, what is she thinking?
No, this is the best part of the story.
Yeah.
I played it for my mom. And my mom thought it was a song about a train. Because I was a good songwriter at 10. I didn't ever say drugs. And I was like, Mom, it's about drugs. And she was like, but no, it's not. It's about and we had an argument.
Really?
And I was like, I defend my metaphor.
Was that the first time you fought about your art? Was that like ground zero of your
probably.
Of your learning how to explain what it is you do?
Nobody understands me.
I'm amazed at
my train metaphor.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised because I know this is common, but you have had to defend yourself so much. And I often wondered what you think. You actually address it in this book. You address this idea of what's going on.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have theories on it. And it's not as interesting because who cares? People don't like shit regardless of what you do. But do you think it's because they feel challenged or because they still don't understand?
That's a good question. I think it's probably a little bit of both. It's always a challenging task to figure out why somebody doesn't like something. And it, in my case, it's actually become easier over time to look at a critic and know exactly, if I just get a little bit of access to this person's story, to their likes and dislikes, and especially what kind of childhood they had, I can almost now, I can basically just do a very quick armchair psychology dissection of why Amanda Palmer would be particularly noxious to you. And on the other hand, I actually, especially having gone through a big storm of criticism and controversy on the last record cycle, I've gotten way better at not needing to win people over and not needing to find a way to fix that. I think and the Patreon has had a lot to do with that. But, I've always known that as an artist, it's really important to not want to be everybody's cup of tea. Mm-hmm. Unless you're just making a massive bid for pop stardom, which is a job I never wanted.
You got to get in a box to do that.
Yeah, in order to appeal to all people, things actually have to get quite dark. And I just didn't want to go there. That just seemed like a boring job and a hard job and a kind of an unenjoyable job. And instead, you know, I think I've learned what a huge number of artists have learned, especially when you get into your 40s and 50s, which is it can waste a lot of time and artistic energy trying to explain to the people who aren't really ever going to be on board. It's a way better use of your time to hone your craft and get good at what it is that you actually do, and to get good at what it is that you actually have to say. And one of the great things about having 15,000 people just having my back and giving me their money and putting their unconditional faith in me and whatever it is I'm going to say and whatever it is I'm going to make is, you know, that's given me a lot of room to just sit back, not think about how that song, that, you know, that album, whatever, that creation is going to be received or saleable or marketable, and just know that it will be received. And it will be received, I mean, in an artist's wildest dreams, it will be received with an open heart and open ears, because my fans are very fucking intelligent and very critical, but also very open-minded. Like, they're the perfect audience because they don't take any shit, but they'll give everything a listen.
Right. And you don't have to release a song. That's the thing, right? Your fans, well, they like what you do.
Yeah, I mean, in a weird way, the closest analogy that I have found to what I've been doing for the last 4 years on Patreon is I'm kind of like public radio. You know, and even if those 15,000 people aren't reading every word of every blog and listening to every second of every podcast or every song demo, they want me on air.
Yeah.
Because they think my voice is important.
Oh, it's undoubtedly important. Your voice is so important. And there are lots of people like you, but they don't get heard, right? There are lots of, what I mean is there are a lot of people who have interesting things to say, who are strong, empowered, but they don't have spaces to do it. And you're kind of showing them a way to do it. You just happen to be a great songwriter and a great artist, so you can excel at it and you put the work in. But you don't really have contemporaries, which I find really interesting. Not people who are known.
I think maybe my contemporaries aren't necessarily in the music genre.
Yeah.
Like, I will tell you one thing that changed the course of this record, literally, like made me sit down and write differently when I was finishing up this record, and changed the way I approached my touring show, was being in London and seeing Hannah Gadsby.
Yeah.
And like, she just it was like a stark 2-hour reminder that you can get on a stage and do whatever the fuck you want, and that you can be an entertainer and then stop being an entertainer, and that you can really challenge people and in a loving way make them perfectly uncomfortable. And I basically just sat there watching her show. I went alone. It was a really hard ticket to get because she was already on the up and up, and she was finishing her run at the Soho Theater. And Neil Gaiman was actually the one who tipped me off. He had seen the show a couple weeks before on recommendation from a friend, and he pulled every string and scored me a ticket. And he said, "I'm not telling you anything. You have to see this." And I just sat there feeling so relieved. Not just that she was saying what she was saying and doing what she was doing, but that this audience was getting it. And also thinking, like, I'm not sure this would have happened 5 years ago.
I don't think it would have.
I don't think the world was ready to just be told the truth. And I had a kind of a come to Jesus in my own self, because I was dealing with wanting to write and round out the record and sort of really talk honestly about the last 6 or 7 years of my life. And it was kind of like a call to arms, because I knew that there were things I was sort of avoiding and things that I didn't want to really have to deal with because they're a pain in the ass.
What kind of things?
I had like a note to self in the back of my notebook you know, that there were 8 songs on the record and that there were 2 missing, and one was about abortion and one was about miscarriage. And I would sit down to try and write about those things, and I would just find it really difficult to get it right. And I would also have that voice in the back of my head going like, really, Amanda, like, you're going to write about this on a record and then tour it for 18 months and get on stage and be definitely yelled at by the right wing, probably yelled at by the left wing because you won't get it right. You'll be doing it all wrong. You'll get stuck in the feminist ghetto. You'll be the abortion lady. Like, this is just going to be too exhausting. And then watching Hannah Gadsby's show, I was like, she didn't have to get up and say any of that. She didn't have to get up and talk about how it felt to be raped, how it felt to be hated, how it felt to be that misunderstood. But she did it. And then I sort of had this moment where I was like, oh, fuck. Like, once you have that thought, you can't go back because then you just feel like a pussy.
Did it come quickly after that?
Yeah, actually. The song that I wrote about abortion was, I talk about this in the show. It is a topic that I have been trying to tackle in my songwriting from 50 different angles for 20 years. And it is the hardest topic to write about because it is so hard to figure out how you get in to a song like that. Who speaks?
You know, I remember in the 90s being on the radio, and to that point, the most famous pop song about abortion was the Ben Folds song.
Yeah.
Right? And I remember playing Brick on the air and thinking, okay, this is clearly his perspective, which is powerful and important.
And so awesome to hear a man's perspective.
So awesome to hear that. And I know that women have written about it before, of course, but it was interesting to hear this as a pop song.
Yeah.
You know? And you played with Ben, right?
Yeah. And I mean, poetically, when I wrote Oasis, which was very morose, Ben played drums on it.
That's pretty great.
Yeah. And he produced it.
Will you play for us?
Oasis?
Or anything.
Do you want the happy version or the sad version?
No, I want you to play whatever you want to play. This is your place.
I mean, I can do the very funny part of the stage show where I play Oasis and then I talk about how people would have liked me to do it. All right. When I got to the party, they gave me a 40, and I must have been thirsty because I drank it so quickly. When I got to the bedroom, there was somebody waiting, and it isn't my fault that the barbarian raped me. When I went to get tested, I brought along my best friend Melissa Mahoney, who'd once been molested, and she knew how to get there. She knew all the nurses, they were all really friendly, but the test came out positive. I've seen better days, but I don't care. I just sent a letter in the mail. When I got my abortion, I brought along my boyfriend. We got there an hour before the appointment, and outside the building were all these annoying fundamentalist Christians. We tried to ignore them. I've seen better days, but I don't care. Oasis got my letter in the When vacation was over, the word was all over that I was a crack whore. Melissa had told them, and so now we're not talking, except we have tickets to see Blur in October, and I think we're still going. I've seen better days, but I don't care. I just got a letter in the mail. Oasis sent a photograph. It's autographed and everything. Melissa's gonna wet herself, I swear. Ooh.
That's a beautiful version of that song.
That is the song.
That is the song.
That's the song, the way it was played on the record. And, that was 2008. And I wasn't expecting, I was like, oh, this is just this obviously deeply, deeply black humor, sardonic song. And it was a page ripped right out of my life. I had an abortion when I was 17. I went with my boyfriend and my mom. There was a whole terrifying group of protesters with their typical,
arguably the worst people in the world,
with all of their bloody fetus signs.
Yep.
And I didn't expect the kind of backlash that I got from that song, because I could have anticipated that it would come from the crazy right-wing, fundamentalist Christian, super anti-abortion people. But I got yelled at by a lot of feminists because they said that I was making light of date rape and abortion.
So they were telling you how you should perceive your experience.
Well, I think they were saying that satire is not allowed in the case of rape and abortion, which I would argue with deeply for a really important reason. But also, looking back at that wording, I wish I had had the presence of mind at the time in 2008 when I was criticized for making light of date rape and abortion, to fire right back and go, that's my job. As an artist, this is our job. Yeah. We take the dark and we literally make light out of it. That's our fucking job. Job number one. And if we don't do it, it doesn't get done.
There are a lot of people who would not have understood that deeply personal story had you not have put it that way. It wouldn't have reached people. And you have to reach people in lots of ways.
And also, when you're 17 in high school getting an abortion, one of the most salient things about that is that you compartmentalize deeply. You are forced to compartmentalize because society does not make space to consider and support a 17-year-old girl getting an abortion. You were expected to do it and go to fucking school the next day.
Did you go to the Blur concert?
I didn't actually like Blur or Oasis when I was 17, but the Cure and Depeche Mode just didn't fit the mood. So
I wondered if you'd actually got the autograph, and it was a great piece in the Middle East moment when you were both a fan of Oasis and Blur. So I just thought that's a real big sign that we can come together.
I'll play you 15 seconds of the musical lesson that I do in the stage show, which is, had I written the song in a minor key, really no shit, had I written the song in a minor key and knocked the tempo down and literally sang the same words. When I got to the party, they gave me a 40, and I must have been thirsty because I drank it so quickly, and then go on to talk about date rape and abortion. I think everyone would have been happy.
Dude, you would have been Tori Amos.
You
know what I mean? People celebrate, they celebrate those keys.
Well, it's also there's no leap of imagination required to go, abortion and date rape are sad and bad. And this is the language of sad and bad. But also, that's exactly what satire is.
Well, you do it on the new record as well. It's in the book. You talk about this as well, but now it's years past. And you're a different kind of songwriter, and you have far different life experience. How different was this experience now versus then?
Writing?
Yeah, about the same subjects.
Well, I mean, I feel like it took me 20 years to be a good and a brave enough and unapologetic enough songwriter, but also with a greater understanding of nuance and how a song works. Not just how it technically works and what you play and what key you put it in, but how music is helpful. how the right song delivered the right way with the right words can actually be a tool, can actually help someone. Mm-hmm. And I just sort of went beyond all other thoughts for this song. And I was like, what is that song that could actually just be a tool? What's the song I would have needed to hear? What's the song I would send to my friend on her way to get an abortion? And the job was that simple. And that's sort of the job I gave myself. And I don't think I was a good enough songwriter to do that at 25 because I didn't know what to say yet.
You do now.
Yeah.
Want to play some more? What are you going to play?
I'm going to play you the song.
All right, let's do it.
And you actually just made me realize something that I had not realized before about this song, which is really interesting.
What's that?
It starts in a major key.
What do you think about when you realize that?
It had to. There had to be. What's interesting is when it gets into the meat of the verses, it goes minor, major, minor. But the way this song is constructed is one of those things that I didn't have much control over. I wrote this song in about a half an hour, but I had been subconsciously writing it for 20 years. And it was one of those great songwriting moments where something just shows up fully baked and comes out, and then you sit there and you're like, where did that come from? But, I think songs are really interesting that way, the way they incubate.
Yes. I like the idea that you don't have you have as much control over it as you can have, but you don't have absolute control over it. And most of the best
it tells
songs,
you what to do.
Yeah, most of the best songs that I've heard and the stories when I speak to the artists about it in this house, a lot of them have the kind of resignation, and it's a sweet resignation because they're like, I can't just do it again. It just is.
Yeah.
And the craft, you have to put the craft, you do that all the time.
You got to be ready.
Yeah, so that you're ready when it happens.
Totally.
Let's hear it.
Jill, it's Amanda just waving from London. I know that you're going tomorrow, the hardest decision. And I've been on this side of the phone for a month, and I know you're in hell, and you know that I know what you're feeling. Life's such a bitch, isn't it? When you have a baby, they throw you a party. And then when you die, they get together for a cry. But no one's gonna celebrate you. No one's gonna bring you cake, and no one's gonna shower you with flowers. The doctor won't congratulate you. No one on that pavement's gonna shout at you that your heart also matters. I'm not sure that you'll get this in time. I don't know if you're checking your voicemail at all, but in case it's the morning and you're off of the green line and walking through Copley, I want you to stop for a second. I want you to listen. You don't need to offer the right explanation. You don't need to beg for redemption or ask for forgiveness. And you don't need a courtroom inside of your head where you're acting as judge and accused and defendant and witness. It's a strange grief, but it's grief. Look at all the women in the street. You know the statistics chill, even though they may not help. Isn't it amazing how we can never tell who is in an identical hell? No one's gonna celebrate you, no one's gonna bring you cake, and no one's gonna shower you with flowers. The doctor won't congratulate you, no one on that pavement's gonna shout at you that your heart also matters. No one's gonna compliment you, no one's gonna nod their head and wink in league with what you are pursuing. No one's gonna tie surprise balloons onto your desk at work, and no one's gonna ask you how you're doing. But I'll be back in Boston by next Thursday. Why don't I come over? I can bring some friends if you want us to come. We can bring you cake and we can bring you flowers. We can bring you wine and we can talk for hours. Ukulele by request. We'll throw you the best abortion shower.
That's a tune.
Thanks.
That's a big end. Will you play one more for us?
Yeah.
Please do. What do you want to play next? That's a beautiful song. Can you compartmentalize yourself away from that song when you're playing it?
I don't want to.
But you did say, shit, I have to tour these for 18 months. So
Yeah. I don't write songs that I wouldn't want to play again and again and again. You know, I've gotten into a really good touring pattern where I learn the songs more intimately, and I love the challenge of taking them deeper. And I love, I sort of love exercising the muscle of non-compartmentalization. Actors have to do it too. You have to snap into an emotion and you have to snap out of it, but it doesn't mean that you put up these giant walls.
Oh no.
It means you just learn how to roller skate.
That's right. All right, what do you play next?
I wonder what I should do now because,
You've already played that first song, which we appreciate, so you don't have to, whatever you want.
well, I mean, I could play the ride. It's epic, but Drowning in the Sound. I mean, I also just don't know your audience. I feel like doing a banger might be good.
They're on board for whatever you want to bring.
That's not fair.
Sure it is. In fact, it's what you want.
That's really hard. That's hard because I would do either Drowning in the Sound or The Ride is so great and so long, and I don't get to do it on most radio. You know what? I take that back. I'm going to do Death Thing. If we still have time, I'll pop The Ride on top of it. It's just so weird too. I'm just starting to do promo on this record. I don't know the things yet. I'm like figuring it out. This is actually the last song I wrote. Almost second to last song. Voicemail Virgil was the last one. This is like the newest child on the record. It's the finale. It's the last song on the record. This is actually the last song I wrote. Almost second to last song. Voicemail Virgil was the last one. This is like the newest child on the record. It's the finale. It's the last song on the record. It's gonna get loud, just so you know. Let's try to end on a pleasant note. You've ended endless things and you know how it goes. You lick your wounds, put them in a jar on the shelf. You lick a stamp on a letter to your old self. You always liked being good at things, didn't you? Isn't it funny what a person can get used to? And now, just look what you've done. I hope you're happy. You've beaten everyone. I think it's fair to say the word is all over town. Did he answer? No. Did he answer? No. Did he answer? No. Not even a whisper. No. So it's over. Yes, you know the drill. You're the expert. You're the expert. You're the expert. Congratulations. You've really got this death thing down. You can have it. You don't always get to pick what you get good at. And now, look how far you've come. You used to need them, and now you could lose everyone without even blinking an eye. So go on, put on your crown. Did she answer? No. Did she answer? No. Did she answer? No. Not a single heartbeat, no. So it's over. Yes, you know the drill. You're the expert. Congratulations. You've really got this deaf thing down. You've really got this deaf thing down. You've really got this deaf thing down. You've really got this deaf thing You've really got this death thing down.
That's a really great choice.
Sorry about your piano.
I don't mind. It should be played that way. It's meant to be played that way. I think we're good, right? How's time for Mark?
Here in 30.
Okay, yeah.
Photographs.
All right, cool, yeah. So,
Yeah. I'm happy.
yeah, I'm happy.
No Disney cover for you.
We're okay.
Yeah.
We're okay.
Someday later.
Exactly. Thank you.
That was great.
That was great. Thank you.